2011, room 1010, City Hall. It's about 3 after 9 in the morning. This is the Energy and Environment Committee, and we're in for a lot of excitement this morning. Okay. It's the Bureau Sanitation Status Report.
That's right.
So it's going to be comprehensive.
Very much so. The excitement started already.
Yeah, the excitement has started already, yes. Okay, so who is the lucky person who's going to make this presentation?
Well, we decided to spread the good luck among four of us. So it's going to be Lisa. Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good
And
morning.
Enrique Zaldivar, the Director of the Bureau of Sanitation.
All right.
And so we have Lisa Maury, Tracy Minamidi, Dale Hashkalil, and myself, who will be part of what we hope is a brief but concise presentation. And thank you, Madam Chair, for bringing us before your committee. In response to a council motion by both Councilmember Parks and yourself, Madam Chair, the Bureau of Sanitation is pleased to present the status report of the city's clean water program, also known as the wastewater program, including a financial plan with a rate adjustment proposal. The essence of the city's clean water program has been largely shaped by the our country's Clean Water Act of 1972. In effect, this act also marked the birth of the city's clean water program. We as a city have invested over $6.3 billion in the program to achieve such monumental accomplishments as the Hyperion Pool Secondary, the ceasing of ocean disposal of biosolids, the construction of the NORS and the EASIS tunnel sewers, and the nitrogen toxicity removal at both Tillman and LAG water reclamation plants. These have been huge accomplishments of the program over the last 2 decades. Now, admittedly, many of the city efforts have been done as a result of judicial actions brought about by litigation with regulatory and environmental steward organizations, often leading to adversarial relationships. Through the leadership of your council and the mayor, we believe that we have turned the corner in our relationship with these organizations. One that is based on the mutual pursuit of a common interest, which is the protection of the environment, to the benefit of the city residents. Now, the primary source of funds for the Clean Water Program is the sewer service charge, paid for by city customers through and collected by the DWP bill. It's important to note that while the Clean Water Program made some of its larger infrastructure investment over the last 2 decades, the sewer service charge fee had been held flat. In fact, it was flat for close to 11 years, from the mid-90s to the mid-2000s. This meant that we did an awful lot of debt issuance and debt borrowing, causing our fund to be uncomfortably leveraged. And at this point, I would like to ask Lisa Maury, who is the Clean Water Fund Manager, an extremely knowledgeable person, knows this fund inside out, and has done a marvelous job in managing it over the last 8 years. Lisa Maury.
Good morning, everyone. The presentation we have for you today is a little bit of a hybrid presentation. There's parts of it that's the basis for the presentation that we're giving to community groups and neighborhood councils, but we've added some extra slides that have some more of the details for you to take a look at today. One thing we're trying to emphasize, particularly when we're out with the communities, is that we're a 24/7 operation. When money gets tight, we can't close down certain days of a week or shorten our hours. We have to operate all of the time because the flow never stops coming. We've got 4 water reclamation and wastewater treatment plants, again, operating around the clock, that we have to keep in good operating condition so we don't have permit violations, which can lead to fines. Our sewer system is, well, it's massive. We've got 6,700 miles of sewer. So at any given time, we've got 50, maybe 60 projects underway to rehabilitate our sewer and keep it in good working condition. Because of these rehabilitations and because of the additional cleaning work that we're doing, and additional videotaping and monitoring of the sewers, we've been very successful in reducing our sewage spills by 80% over the last 10 years. We started out having about 2 spills a day, and now we're down to about 2 a week. So while that's a great improvement, one thing that is of concern to us is that our sewers are getting older. Right now, typically we expect our sewers to last on average of 80 years. Some last longer, some don't make it quite that far. And we've got about 20% of our system that's more than 80 years old. So age in and of itself isn't necessarily a sign that a sewer is going to fail, but it certainly means we need to pay more attention to them. Unfortunately, this is what it looks like when we're not paying enough attention to our sewers. This photo is from the South Los Angeles area back in the 1990s when we had some serious overflows in our system. And this is a picture we don't think any of our communities should ever have to look at. We had mentioned before the average life of the sewer is about 80 years. Well, with our current capital improvement budget that's dedicated to repair and rehab of our system, our replacement cycle is once every 168 years. So obviously that's more than twice the average life of a sewer. It's even more of a concern at our wastewater treatment plants, where the equipment, the processes have an average life that's more like 20 to 30 years. So only being able to replace things every 168 years just isn't sustainable. To put it in perspective, the average homeowner spends about 2% the value of their house on annual upkeep. Some years it's less, but in other years you've got to do the roof replacement and it's more. So 2% is a pretty good average amount. And that's what we're targeting. We just have a much bigger house. The estimated replacement value of our system is $20 billion. So if all we're doing is 2% a year, that would be $400 million a year, and we're nowhere close to that. So we've been doing a lot with less for a long time. One of the ways we've been able to control our costs is through staff reductions. Since 1994, we've reduced staff by 29%. 15% just in the last 3 years. We've been able to cut our operating costs the past couple of years by being smarter how we do chemical dosing in the treatment plants, and we've saved $27 million. And we've been able to restructure our debt and are projecting savings of over $400 million from that. So by tightening those belts, we've been able to keep some money available to do our rehab projects. But unfortunately, we're at the point now where we're running out of things to tighten. As I mentioned before, this graph illustrates the cuts that we've made in our staffing levels from our high back in 1994. So we had some significant cuts. A lot of that we were able to do by increasing the automation at our treatment plants. We were able to reduce staff. Looking at it, you see it coming back up to a secondary peak. That's as we were staffing up for the collection system settlement agreement. But after we got a few years into that, we realized we didn't need quite as much staff as we thought we did, and we've been able to make the cuts. And we're projecting getting down to certainly the lowest number in at least 20 years, if not a lot more, in next year's budget. To give you a feel for the history of the sewer service charge, this refers to that 11-year plateau that Enrique talked about. And as he mentioned, the way we were able to get through those years, it's not that our costs weren't increasing, but we got over $1 billion worth of federal clean water grants. And so that funded a lot of our expansion work out at Hyperion. But we also did an awful lot of debt financing, and we're still feeling the effects of that debt today. We've been able to hold the rates steady for the past 3 years. When we started the settlement agreement, the thought at that time was we'd get rate adjustments for the first 5 years, and then we'd come back and get rate adjustments for the last 5 years once we had a better feel for the program costs. The timing of that, unfortunately, coincided with a lot of the economic downturn, so we held off a year, and we held off another year, and we're proposing holding off part of another year. So, enough with the intro. What are we planning? The proposed rate adjustments that are in the report back to Council end up being an average increase of $37 per year, every year for 10 years. However, we've been working with the CAO and updating our numbers based on the latest info we've got on labor negotiations and what's going into the 11-12 budget. So we've been able to squeeze that down, so an average of about $34 per year. It's not a flat increase. We've really tried to squeeze the first couple of years because we know the economy's not where we would like it to be. So the increases the first 2 years are closer to $20 per year, and then they increase more in following years. So I mentioned we got some new numbers from the CAO we incorporated, but there's also some other ways that we were able to really reduce the proposed rate adjustments. And we think of those as sort of these financial dials that we can adjust. You know, we were shooting for specific year-end cash balances, debt service coverage ratios, and amounts that were going to fund the capital program that would make us comfortable. Well, we challenged ourselves to reduce those lower. It means a little more monitoring on our part, but we think that's a pretty good trade-off. For instance, previously the numbers were based on ending with a year-end cash balance on the capital side of $100 million. What we did, because we are showing a smaller CIP in the future, is rather than sticking with a flat $100 million, set it at 50% of the capital program. So in some years that lets us get the year-end cash balance down, 63 million, 78 million. So that was one of the dials that we adjusted. And that's something that we'll be looking for direction from the council on how you would like to adjust those dials to get the rate adjustments where you'd like to see them. Okay. We always have this eternal debate on the best way to put the numbers out there. Do we look at the annual numbers? Do we look at monthly charges? Well, we just have them both here so everybody can look at the one they like the best. And what I'm showing is the original column matches what's in that rate report, with the revised column being the latest numbers that we've been able to reduce. So if we talked about the increase being $34 per year every year for 10 years on the annual side. If you'd prefer to look at the monthly charge, the increase is about $3 per month. Or if you look at the daily charge, right now we charge people $1 a day for sewer service for a typical single-family residential. What we're proposing at the end of 10 years will be $2 a day for what we think is one of the most important yet basic services. Okay, there's a lot of information on this chart, so bear with me. What we're showing with the bars are our expenditures. We've got on the left side the actuals for the past several years, and then a projection going 5 years into the future. The expenditures shown on there at the bottom are our operations expenses, then the debt service, and then the capital program on top. That follows the flow of funds that we're required to follow under our bond covenant. The lines on there show our revenue. The lowest line is our largest source of revenue, the sewer service charge, and the associated quality surcharge fee for our industrial waste customers. The middle line above that shows additional revenues we get in. Some of that's from our contract agencies, some of it's from interest earnings on our funds, and other miscellaneous revenue sources. The top line shows the additional revenue that we get from debt financing. So the gap between the top two lines on there is what we need to debt finance in order to keep our program going. So what happens if we don't get a rate adjustment? Well, that thick red line on the right side basically shows where we would have to cut the program. We'd have to make significant cuts to our capital program, first of all, not reduce that 168-year replacement cycle, but watch it grow, because we wouldn't be able to invest enough in our system. To get an idea of how our rates currently compare, we've looked at it both on a national scale, looking at the 10 largest cities where we're right in the middle. We've also looked at it more locally with large California cities, as well as some of our closer neighbors. Again, we're in the middle. Our expectation would be at the end of 10 years, we're still going to be in the middle. What we've seen from national surveys is that agencies are planning to raise their rates for the next 5 years between 6.5% and 7.5% per year. Everyone in the industry is facing the same issues of aging infrastructure and increased regulations. So we think even after 10 years, we'd still be in the middle. So what we're talking about today, it really ends up being pretty simple. The services that are provided for the Clean Water Program really form the foundation for a lot of the other environmental programs here in the city. We can't make improvements in other areas if we're in a situation where we're concerned about sewage overflows and having that impact, or treatment plant violations that impact our waters. To get a feel for what the next steps are, we're still pretty early in the process. After going through Energy and the Environment Committee, this would then go to full council. What would get approved at that time is simply the authorization for us to do our ratepayer notice with the proposed fees. We've already started reaching out and having some community meetings. We would certainly keep that going during the Prop 218 notice, which has a requirement that we wait 45 days before we have a hearing to give folks a chance to make comment on it. Then this would come back to council the second time, and that's where the public hearing would actually occur and rates would be adopted subject to mayor's concurrence. Our proposal is to have the rates effective January 1st of 2012.
Let the record reflect that Mr. Cardenas has joined us, and I think you've done a really good job of laying out your need, and I like the way you broke it down in terms of where the gaps are. I think that it's very user-friendly, and once you start rolling this out in terms of your outreach to the public, I think that it will be very educational. I don't know what the reception will be, but I think it's going to be very educational. Now, I wanted you to talk a little bit more extensively about your outreach and education plan and when you intend to commence that. And I want to urge you to go far beyond the neighborhood council network. I think that's going to be very, very important, because while neighborhood councils are a very important part of doing outreach, sometimes in many communities they only represent a small perspective of a community. So I'm sure Mr. Cardenas will have comments on that. I want to hear something that's comprehensive and full-bodied in terms of what you intend to do.
Absolutely. We have reached out to the neighborhood councils, also some other community groups, for instance, homeowners associations, environmental groups, and also business associations. So we're trying to cast a very wide net. We've also been working with your staff to get additional recommendations on groups that we should be talking to outside the neighborhood council.
You know what might be helpful to you is if you ask every single council person if they would sponsor at least one meeting from the universe of contacts that each person has, so that you get something that's broad and may not be in your database. Why don't you do that?
Will do.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be anything overly extensive other than you know, being out in the district somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all have field offices.
Mhm.
Maybe inviting 50 key leaders to each one, religious, educational, social service, healthcare, anybody who's business, anybody who's going to be affected by this is going to, you know, care a lot.
Mhm.
Okay, and then the other question, this is I need to ask this question, because I want to hear what I saw the chart, but what's the impact to the city and the Clean Water Program if we can't get any rate increases approved?
Well, you know, Madam Chair, the picture wouldn't be pretty. We, of course, have the collection system, sewer system, where the impacts will be very visible if we are not able to even do emergency kind of repairs. Just last week, we had a collapse of a sewer in Studio City, good-sized sewer, actually, 48-inch, we're throwing all the resources to repair it. So it could get very bleak in the streets. Now, in our treatment plants, while it's less visible immediately, eventually it's a picture that's also very bleak with regards to the water quality in the beach or LA River, Bayona Creek. So it's a very regrettable, bleak picture if we're unable to maintain our infrastructure and our permit requirements. Tracy, you want to say a little more about the treatment?
I was just going to add, Tracy Minamidi, Chief Operating Officer, Bureau of Sanitation, that without a rate increase, we would essentially have a capital program in the range of $10 to $20 million, which would only be able to fund our emergency work, things that happen out in the streets with the sewer collapses or breaks, and that would be basically about all that we would be able to finance.
Are you pretty close to that now in terms of doing emergency work? And
It's tight right now. At this point, we are able to do some of the construction projects at our treatment plants, but we're holding off on awarding or putting out any other projects to bid at this point.
so how are you dealing with lateral sewer repairs, and right now who's paying for that and the connections? And I'm just wondering if there's any chance that we can engage or assist property owners or homeowners who need to make repairs, especially if we end up having to approve a rate adjustment.
Madam Chair, Adel Hash Khalil, Assistant Director for Bureau of Sanitation. Currently, the sewer system in the city is about 6,700 miles, but if you look at the entire sewer system, including the sewer from the home to the mainline sewer in the street, you're probably looking at tripling that amount. So the entire sewer system is additional 11,000 miles in addition to the 7,000 miles we're looking at. So we believe that part of the integral part of the system is that connection between the home to the mainline sewer. Currently, the responsibility of the maintenance, repair, and upgrade of the home sewer from the property all the way to the city's mainline sewer across the city street into the middle of the street usually is the responsibility of the homeowner, property owner. And we've been really working hard on working with homeowners of letting them know many times as we televise sewers when there is roots inside the laterals, we let them know through communication to let them know that there is a potential problem. But laterals, most of the problems we have in the sewer system when it comes to roots and blockages comes from the roots that come in from private laterals. So we see that relationship and importance of that relationship. So one of the things that we've been looking at is how can we provide more support and service, because we get calls all the time where a homeowner, especially a low-income homeowner, have this problem, this collapse or blockage or sewage backing up into their home. They come to us, we go there and we determine it's not in our sewer system, it's in their private lateral, and we cannot do more than just help them out and giving them advice. But really what we're looking at right now is how can we use some of the funding that we have to provide some loans, some assistance to the homeowners so they can be able to use the city as a resource and get a low interest loan and come in and repair that lateral. So as part of this program, we are actually proposing that we create a fund, a loan fund, and provide that to homeowners that have a problem, that they need the $10,000 to $15,000 to repair this immediately without causing a strain on them, on their families. So we are proposing that we create this fund to provide that quick help, quick access to the homeowner through a very low interest loan that they can come in and have that lateral repaired
Have you worked
quickly.
out the details yet on how quickly loans would need to be repaid?
We are working through it, but I think one of the things that we're hoping to hear is as we go to communities and neighborhoods, we want to hear more about, for example, one of the things that we're talking about is what is the repayment, how much time can the homeowners need to repay this loan? Is it 10 years, is it 15 years, is it 5 years? So right now we're looking at a discussion we're having with the homeowners and the community to hear from them is how, how can they afford and how quickly can they repay this, so the more we can make this into a revolving fund. So we have some details.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting when you do the outreach, because a lot of people, especially I know in South Los Angeles, they don't realize that they're responsible for their public right-of-way and the trees. And I think in the southern part of the city, many years ago, the city planted carob, bottlebrush, ficus, which are horribly invasive in terms of going through pipes and sewers, and just strong in terms of cutting into them and then grow over the property line onto people's private property. So I will be very interested to find out what people's perspective is on who they believe is responsible. Because my guess is that they're going to feel that the city is responsible because we planted those trees there in the first place. And when the time that we planted them, we didn't know about root barriers and things like that to keep the roots contained and to grow down and not out. But I want to pay special attention to that once you start rolling to see what people's response is, because I think they're going to be, this is going to take a lot of education. And I think it's going to be something that people will not be highly receptive to hearing. So why don't I let Mr. Cardenas, if you have any questions,
Yeah.
and then we'll go to the cards.
Thank you. You show a few tables and you compare our rates with other cities throughout California, and then you also compare our rates with cities throughout the country, and we're somewhere in the middle right now. Could you provide for us some charts on these other cities and whether or not they've been raising their rates since 1994, since we pretty much have been stagnant for over 15 years now? Go ahead.
Yeah, we can certainly do that, Councilman. Lisa touched on what the trend is for the forward years, that for the most part, cities are looking at, or water districts in many instances, looking at an average of a 7%, 6.5% to 7.5% increase for the next 5 years. That's a forward trend. We will get you the charts for what they have done in the past 10 years.
Because one of the problems that happens with any constituency is once we've spoiled them into thinking that rates don't need to go up, and then all of a sudden we start to explain to them that, we've scrubbed the numbers, we've laid people off, we've reduced the number of staff, we've created efficiencies, we're being responsible for the dollars that you are paying us, but we can't continue to service your system with the dollars you're giving us, so we have to adjust it up. One of the problems is, what I've heard many times is, well, no, don't adjust it. During tough times like this, they say, well, people can't afford it. And then during good times, they say, why upset the apple cart? So there's always arguments as to why not. But unfortunately, you have a system to run. And your argument is, how can I run it efficiently? And at what level of fees should I be collecting to handle it responsibly? So, and I think part of that responsibility is educating your public, our public, to the facts of the matter is, there's no magic here. This system is worth billions of dollars. This system is supporting 4 million constituents and businesses, et cetera, and we cannot run it on the fees that we're collecting today. But at the same time, you should be arming yourself with the fact that, no, we're not a mean city. We're not an isolated city. We are just like everybody else. Yeah, their rates might be a little higher, a little lower than ours or what have you, but the ebb and flow of managing and sustaining a system like this is, the fact of the matter is, we have to sustain hundreds of millions of dollars of upgrades every single year, or else it's going to collapse, literally collapse. So those are the kinds of things that we need to talk about. We need to talk about recent history, the lifetimes of the people you're talking to. I don't think we have to go back 50, 100 years, maybe on a point you do, but as far as the economics of running this and who's paying for it and who will pay for it if we don't keep the system in order. And there's a very famous line, I'm not sure if it was Will Rogers or one of those famous people that people quote all the time, and there's a statement where he made where he says, water's for life and sanitation is for dignity. And all you have to do is go to third world countries and realize that we don't want it that way. We don't want to walk out of our home and smell feces. We don't want to walk out of our home and then look at somebody who's actually physically being detrimented by the fact that we have all that kind of human waste, literally at our feet. That's where we're not there. And thank God, we have a world-class system in Los Angeles, and hopefully people can appreciate the fact that they live in a world-class city. And part of being a world-class city is that you don't have those smells. You don't have those indignities. You don't have those health issues emanating from a system like this. There are many, many cities around the world that actually have those problems. There are cities here in the United States that have those problems. One of the things that I want you to start practicing is, on one of these charts, you have Memphis, Tennessee is $7.19. You need to start practicing. The answer to the question is, wait a minute, I'm an Angelino and I want to be like Memphis, Tennessee. I want to be at $7.19. I don't want to be at $32.70. I don't want to be at $60 10 years down the road. I want to be at $7.19. No. I want you to tell me, how come you can't do what they do with $7.19? How are you going to answer that question?
Well, in fact, there are other similar cities that had done the Memphis model of maintaining their system stagnant, if you will, and not upgrading it like they should have. City of Atlanta comes to mind, in which their system essentially collapsed and had to quickly and immediately, both from a basic public health consideration and a regulatory consideration, they raised their rates. Is it triple?
Yeah, it's almost $100
You're
a
at the
month.
top of the list. I see Atlanta at $110.
That's right.
So basically, your answer to somebody on that question is, well, if you want to stay at the bottom, after the lawsuits and after the mayhem and after the health issues, after all those kinds of things, then you, constituent, are going to be at the top, because that's what happens. And we actually have an example of a city that wanted to be like Memphis and then ended up being at the top of the list when it comes to how much you're being charged as a constituent.
And we actually, I'm sort of somewhat embarrassed to say this, we kind of teased with that notion ourselves 5-6 years ago. You saw the chart on our reduction of spills over the last 5 years, going from roughly 2 a day, about 700 a year, to now an 80% reduction. So we want to make that a thing of the past. But we did have that almost like a common sight in L.A., where if you were driving down any one street, there would be a spill. As you were saying, Councilman, essentially, as Adele has brown streets. We have green streets, of course, but, this would have been brown streets. So we saw some of that here in L.A., and so we completely agree that we don't want to go back to that.
And what happens when we have spills? We just go clean it up, or does some entity or some agency slap us with a fine, et cetera? And who pays that fine? Is it the ratepayer that pays the fine at the end of the day, or is it somebody else?
Exactly. I mean, the first thing that we do is it's the sewage. If it's captured, it's great, but most of the time it gets to the water bodies, impacts the beaches, our businesses, et cetera, which is a huge impact to our economy and our backbone and to the quality of life. But really, the regulators, the EPA, regional board, and our environmental advocates are looking at this, and they would basically issue us either fines or issue us administrative orders that eventually will cost us a huge amount of money in just litigation, not investing in the sewer system, just litigation and fines.
When you have a spill, what's the likelihood of the fine being $500, $5,000, $50,000, $500,000? What kind of fines, what magnitude are we paying in fines when we have a a small, medium, or large spill?
I mean, the city could be subject to about, $10 a gallon. That's usually what you can have. And then every incident.
And what's a small spill?
Small,
1,000 gallons?
yeah, you probably look at 1,000 gallons as the
So that's
medium spill.
$10,000 for a small spill, just the fine. But
Just
we
the-
still have to send a crew out there, maybe even hire a third party to go clean it up quickly, and then we have to pay that bill on top of that.
Sure.
And then, so what's a large spill?
Large spill, 500,000 gallon, million gallon spill.
1 million gallons, so at $10, that's $10 million just in the fine.
Exactly.
And to clean up a 10 million gallon spill probably costs more in
We-
cleanup costs than 1,000 gallons.
And we had an incident recently in the area around West LA where we had the overflow of a 500,000 gallon, and just the cleanup cost was in the $2 million just to do cleanup all the way to the ocean.
What was the fine? Are we?
We have not, I mean, just from,
Threatening to fine us.
I mean, there's a potential, but I think what we have really helped us tremendously in avoiding the fine is the performance and the investment that we have made and continue to make. So if the investment and the commitment to the system is away, then we're opening ourselves up for having these fines become reality.
So a scenario like a city like Memphis, Tennessee, probably couldn't negotiate their way out of a fine by
Exactly.
proving that we did everything we could to prevent it, accidents do happen, et cetera, so the fine perhaps is lower if you can prove to that agency that actually can fine us,
Sure.
that we are actually being proactive instead of reactive.
Exactly.
So a city like Memphis, Tennessee is probably considered to be, in the eyes of everybody involved in these systems or in this world and this environment, Memphis, Tennessee could be seen as a city that's more reactive than proactive.
Exactly.
And when we're reactive, who ends up paying more money? It might sound pretty impressive that $7.19, but at the end of the year, a city like that is probably paying millions of dollars in other things that perhaps they're having to do some kind of special assessments. They're probably having to get the money from the same constituents, but from a different pot.
That's correct. And we, on that very point of the fines, Councilman, we have built up what I call good faith capital with our regulators, exactly what you said, that we have been able to negotiate, some reasonable arrangements because of what we have done and the commitment of the city to maintain its system, upgrade it, and keep it in good shape for the future. If we were not in that kind of position to negotiate or to articulate our commitment, we would be looking at a far different picture when it came to fines. And I think later you will hear a little bit from folks who are from the regulatory world on how they have come to see the city in recent years versus how they came to see us in years past.
Okay. Also, I would challenge you in these meetings and these hearings with the public, et cetera, I would challenge you to be bold enough to ask the public if they want you to be responsible, if they want you to be efficient, if they do want a dignified system. And I would challenge you also to infuse into these presentations some real honest examples of what is happening, even in we don't have to go to Bangladesh. You can just stay right here in the United States and give real live examples of the squalor that some situations that has manifested right here in the United States that real Americans have to deal with because they were not being honest, the government was not being honest with them, and they were fooling them into thinking that if they don't raise the rates, everything's just fine.
We will do that.
Because this is all about prevention, this is all about being proactive, and this is all about maintaining a level of standard that first and foremost our constituents deserve, and secondly, there's plenty of agencies that oversee us that are willing to step in and take money from our constituents if in fact our system fails, correct?
That's correct.
So I would challenge you to please be bold enough to start your presentation as kindly as you can, but asking them, are these the things that you want from us? And then at the end of the day, you're probably going to get 80% of the people who bother to come to these meetings. No matter what you say, you're probably going to get 80% telling you, we still don't want you to raise our rates.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that. There's some constituents that'll never be satisfied. There's some constituents that don't want you to raise, matter of fact, they want you to lower the rates. That's one of my last questions, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Which of these agencies, can you find an agency that's actually lowering their rates? Either on a one-time basis or on a going forward basis?
No,
I just came from a meeting with all the clean water agencies, all the sewer agencies across the country, and there is actually a financial review of all the rates. The majority, I would say 75% of the agencies that we talked to are increasing the rates by about 7.5%. I talked to Washington, D.C. They're increasing the rates by double digits over the next 5 years. Cleveland, Ohio, double digits over the next 10 years. Akron, Ohio, the same thing. Across the country, they've had a steady increase of about 7.5% increase, and they're looking at it for the next 5 years. I haven't seen anybody who's lowering rates. It's just not something they can do, especially with the increase in cost. And one thing that we look at actually is if you look at the dollars that revenue we're getting today, and you compare it to the revenue we're getting in 1992 and apply inflation, the value of the dollar, the revenue we're getting today is actually 6% less than the value that we had in 1992. So we're doing more actually with less. So without the adjustment, we're going to be behind the ball.
Exactly. And the thing is, you can chalk it up as that was phase one. Phase one was efficiencies. Phase one was trying to maintain on the same dollar, basically. That was phase one. And you're at the end of your rope on phase one. You cannot continue to maintain the system at the level that is required of you. First of all, there's the dignity requirement of your constituents, and then there's a regulatory requirement. You cannot comply with those responsibilities at the rates that you're collecting right now. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay, so you're going to want to make the case about what phase one was. Phase one was just wringing that towel as much as you can. By the way, I would not use Washington, D.C. because people assume that they're knee-deep in this stuff no matter what in Washington, D.C. So you might want to use other cities as examples. I'm sure there are plenty. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cardenas. And as we go to these cards, one other suggestion that I'd like to make is you could work with the Chief Legislative Analyst's office to pull some census data, because in my district, for example, we have 45,000 brand-new residents over the last 10 years. And when you think about infrastructure and how you accommodate the influx of new people, and obviously the load that it puts on the sewer system, it's a bit of a reality check. You know, if we actually have to build to accommodate the people that we have here now. And we're way behind, we're lagging behind. So that may be helpful to you too. So why don't I call the cards so we don't run out of time, and I think we can do item 2 rather quickly.
Okay.
All right, so if you folks would let these seats become available, I can call up Mark Gold, Louis McAdams, Jason Schmidt, and Sam Unger. Okay, Mark Gold.
Good morning, council members. I just wanted to say I thought that your advice on how to deal with this was incredibly strong. On behalf of Gila Bay, we do support a sewer service charge increase, and really it's to avoid this wastewater infrastructure crisis which is pending, and so that we don't return back to the days of 1985 when Gila Bay was formed. We were literally formed for this exact issue, where we had sewage spills during the middle of the summer. We had tumors with fin rot. We had a dead zone in the middle of the bay. and the success story with the City of Los Angeles in upgrading their sewer infrastructure and their sewage treatment plants is literally of national renown, and there's been a 95% reduction in sewage solids going into the bay. Now, you heard about the sewage spill frequency getting drastically reduced. As you know, that was the result, I wish the Baykeeper was here, it was the result of Baykeeper litigation, where even though we had those infrastructure improvements that occurred in the early 90s, the sewer system was still in a state of disrepair. So we've seen what can happen and the public health risks that we were talking about. I thought your point on dignity was extraordinary, Councilman Cardenas. We all remember the sewage spills, you know, in Manual Arts High School where kids are trying to go to school. We don't want to return to those days, and that's exactly what this prevents. In my last 30 seconds, though, I do want to say, although we strongly support this, that we want to put it in the context, from Gila Bay, in the context of there's an integrated resources plan that's extraordinary. They've been able, the city has gotten national awards for that plan. This is the first step. This is the blocking and tackling easy part of it. The harder stuff is going to be when you see Department of Water and Power and their water rates coming in, because that's how we have to get to water recycling, rainwater capture, and looking at an overall integrated approach to managing LA's water. One Water is what you got the award for. This is just the first step.
Thank you. Louis McAdams.
Madam Chairman, I'm Louis McAdams, founder, president, Friends of the Los Angeles River. And I just wanted to sort of take a different approach and bring up another whole question. I mean, the whole question of the idea that the water is wastewater could not be further from the truth. From Friends of the Los Angeles River's point of view, the water that's coming down the LA River is of very high quality, and it supports an increasingly rich ecology. Last year, we did the first study ever of the fish and fishing in the Los Angeles River. And one of the things that we discovered, besides the startling fact that many people are not only catching and releasing fish, but they're actually eating them. And we did the study, we checked 25 sample fish for PCBs and mercury, and the fish were basically clean. And I think that has to reflect back on the success of our wastewater and water retention, water recycling, still beginning a system. Last week before last, Friends of the Los Angeles River sponsored its annual LA River Cleanup, the Gran Limpieza. And for the first 5,000 people who showed up, they each received a T-shirt, which on it has a picture of the great species that's now extirpated in the Los Angeles River, but will return one of these days, which is the steelhead trout. This was one of the largest steelhead trout runs on the Southern California coast. And this says basically we're challenging that the last steelhead trout was caught not coincidentally the year that the paving of the river began. This T-shirt with 5,000 people were wearing calls for the return of the steelhead trout by 2020. We look to be partners with you guys to make that happen. Thank you very much.
Jason Schmidt.
Thank you, council members. My name is Jason Schmidt with the Natural Urban Systems Group of Tree People, and we fully support the Bureau of Sanitation's request to increase the sewer fees. For obvious reasons, we need clean water, safe and healthy infrastructure to keep Los Angeles clean. However, echoing Mark's points on the IRP, we fully encourage the city to look at a more integrated approach to our water resources and the multiple benefits that we can get out of a comprehensive ecosystem management of our wastewater, our water supply, and with our stormwater systems. Currently, these three seemingly disparate water resources are actually integrated, and the IRP process has demonstrated that. In the upcoming months, we're going to see not only the calls for sewer increase rates, but also stormwater fees and the DWP looking to raise their water rates as well. So we definitely want to see and help the city approach this in a more integrated way. There has been a lot of talk about the One Water, bringing these infrastructures together, and we've discussed this thoroughly with the Bureau of Sanitation and the council members, and we would like to continue to work with the city and the county to make this a more integrated approach.
Thank Sam Unger, and then our last speaker will be Stephanie Taylor. Stephanie's here. Maybe someone can give Stephanie a seat.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Councilmember Cardenas. My name is Sam Unger. I'm the Executive Officer of the California Regional Water Quality Control Board. And to echo or to respond to one of your questions, Mr. Cardenas, our agency is the one that would be issuing the fines and things like that. But I'm not here to do that today. I'm here today to acknowledge the city for its commitment to clean water and the progress it's made to date. Mr. Salvador mentioned many things, including sludge out of the bay, the secondary treatment at the Hyperion Treatment Plant, full nitrification and denitrification at Tillman and LIG, which has reduced algae loads and nitrogen impairments of our water bodies. And the result has been many of the city beaches have gone from Fs to A pluses on the Heal the Bay report cards, as well as the 80% reduction in sewer spills. And along with the many restoration and stormwater treatment parks that you're now undertaking in neighborhoods throughout the city will realize its vision for sustainability and a healthy environment for its residents. I remind you that the city is under NPDES permits for its treatment plants, state permits for the collection system.
Okay.
The city is required by law to ensure that its facilities are in compliance with these permits and discharge limits, and failure to do so would subject the city to fines, compliance orders, possibly third-party lawsuits, but most importantly, impacts to the public, business, residents, and public health. Over the past 10 years, the city and state have developed a great partnership and relationship. I think your staff has talked to you about that, as compared to the old adversarial relationship, which were marked by unproductive litigation, acrimony, and fines. So we urge the committee to continue investing and renewing its aging system and ensuring compliance with its permits. It's not just the right thing, it is the law. Thank you.
Oh, Mr. Cardenas has a question for you.
What agency are you with again?
I'm with the state of California, the California Regional Water Quality Control Board, Los Angeles region. So we administer the Clean Water Act, the Port Cologne Water Quality Acts, and the coastal watersheds of Los Angeles and Ventura counties.
Macaria Flores with my office used to work for your department.
Yes, she did.
So I guess I can blame you for the fact that a week doesn't go by that somebody offers her a job to take her away from me. So
I can assure you that I haven't seen any of that paperwork. And if I do, Mr. Cardenas, you'll be the first to know.
Just throw it away.
I appreciate that, but no, I just wanted to compliment you and your testimony and your I think your accuracy of reminding us what kind of relationship agencies like yours should be having with organizations like ours, not an adversarial relationship, not one where everybody points toward the lawyers and says we'll deal with it that way, but actually, once again, I think the key word today in this entire discussion is being proactive, not reactive.
And if I may just add one more thing, I would really like to compliment the staff. It really is a world-class staff in terms of sanitary engineering and sewer engineering, and they've really brought you a great system and many improvements over the last 10 years.
Okay. Stephanie is our next speaker, and then following Stephanie is Tatiana Gar. Is it Gar? Is Tatiana here? Come on up. Somebody give Tatiana a seat. Thank you. Stephanie.
Yes. Good morning. My name is Stephanie Taylor, and I'm representing the Green LA Urban Ecosystems Working Group. You've already heard from Heal the Bay and Tree People, the members of other, but I wanted to mention other groups that are part of the working group that we've worked together to develop a coordinated and consensus message, including Food and Water Watch, the Southern California Watershed Council, the River Project, Urban Semias, City Vida, and others. So last month we were made aware that the Bureau of Sanitation was proposing this increase, and we're in support of that, and we understand the urgency. Our main concern and the reason why we think we need an integrated message is because we think that the public needs the full picture up front in terms of when, especially they're going to be being asked to weigh in on a DWP water increase. They're going to be asked to weigh in on a LA County flood control, stormwater abatement, water increase. And I think the staff made a good case in terms of how this, the sewer fee is the first step in a foundation, but the public needs to hear the complete picture. And so we've worked with the staff, and the staff agrees with that, and so they've asked the Green LA Working Group to support them on that, and we'll work with them on the messaging, and we're also committed to supporting them on their public outreach message. And I just wanted to also just sort of reiterate the main point that Mike and Jason already made in terms of the longer-term goal that we really want to work with the city on is sort of integrating the ecosystems management. It's a long-term goal. We think that's critical, and we want to support the city in doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Tatiana.
Good morning. I'm here on behalf of the Santa Monica Baykeeper. I'm their staff attorney. I'm here to support the proposed rate increase. We are one of the original plaintiffs on the Sewage case, and I can tell you that over the last 6 or 7 years since we had the settlement agreement and consent decree, we've developed a really great relationship with your staff, and we've seen a number of amazing improvements, like the reduction in sewage spills of 80%. If you see the number from year one and see the reduction, I mean, it's truly an outstanding achievement. And so we want to support the proposed rate increase because we believe that this will serve not only our consent decree and the goals and the milestones coming up, but also it should serve as a model of what should be done in the future. We certainly don't view this as a 10-year period for which we see all these improvements, and then after that everything goes downhill. So we certainly have to look ahead and plan, and I think that's exactly what the Bureau of Sanitation is proposing. I live close by a lot of the sewer improvements, Jefferson Boulevard and so forth, and I can tell you every time I pass by and drive by, I tell my daughter and my husband this is our case, and this is an improvement that's going to serve this Culver City and where I live in the city of LA. And so, yeah, we definitely support the proposed rate increase. We think it's necessary to meet the remaining goals. And again, we don't want to lose any of the achievements so far. And we want this to be how the normal course of business. In other words, how things are done in the city of LA for sewage overflows and so forth. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cardenas.
A quick question to you. When you find yourself having to get involved in a negotiation or litigation with any entity and trying to get them to do the right thing, do you acknowledge that having financial resources within that entity to comply is a big part of the picture?
That's the elephant in the room.
And how much did Proposition O contribute to complying to those agreements?
To the consent decree, I'm not sure how much. I think the Bureau of Sanitation staff can.
But Proposition O did play a part
I think so.
in complying with those
I think
agreements.
So. Yeah, because that's what I've read from the staff report, and that's what I know from meetings. So yeah, that definitely contributed, and that's really Proposition O is certainly one of those props that makes the city of LA stand out in comparison to many other cities. So.
Well, thank you. I just want to compliment the chairwoman for taking the lead on Proposition O.
Yeah.
Not all propositions pass. Proposition O was the kind of esoteric proposition that for most of the voters was like, why do you want more of my money? I mean, what does this have to do with anything? But obviously people in this room right now understand how integral Proposition O was, and to pass something that's not sexy or not something that people see as, for example, public safety, is not easy to do. So I just want to thank the chairwoman for taking the lead on that and making it look easy. Thank you.
Yeah, we have projects to point to now so that we can show people where their money was spent and how it was spent and the transformations that it has brought about in the communities. To the extent that, I'm going to ask the CLA to put together a motion to explore the feasibility of perhaps doing a Propo 2, maybe not this year, possibly next year. We have to look at the timing on that. So we'll get input from the stakeholders who participated with us in that before. But I think we need to explore the feasibility of that and build on something tangible. We've got some instructions, some recommendations that need to be fulfilled, and then This team will have to come back to us in 45 days, I believe.
45 days.
Okay, so why don't you read the recommendations, Mr. CLA?
We'll continue the matter for 45 days. In the meantime, instruct the department to proceed with public outreach process and meet with each council office to initiate a meeting in each district, as well as initiate the Prop 218 notice provisions. Also, within 45 days, CAO to provide a report as to the status of their fiscal study with respect to this initiative. And also, Bureau of Sanitation provide a committee with the charge with respect to each other jurisdiction and their rate history the past 5 years, so forth. And our office will provide census data to Bureau of Sanitation with respect to the demographics in the community.
That's excellent. Anything else? Okay, that'll be without objection, and that goes as a communication, right? Okay.
But actually, it stays in
Stays in committee, so.
but they'll initiate those actions.
We can do number 2 very quickly. Is there anybody here from Mr. Rosenthal's office? Number 2? Yeah.
There's no one here from Mr. Rosenthal's office, but he has submitted a letter.
Yeah, we have the letter here for the record. I don't think this is a particularly controversial item.
No.
Something that needs to be done. So
I'll move it.
you're good? All right, Mr. Carter. No, we have no comment cards on this item, correct?
No.
All right, well then,
Move the item.
Recommend approval.
yeah, move to approve. Okay. Now, this is the time period for public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Anyone wishing to speak on public comment should come forward now. Otherwise, the meeting's adjourned. Okay. We're on time. On time. No problem.